world is a fast-moving place, with lives lived on mobile. It's not just a phone in our pockets. Mobile devices can transform the way we work, providing powerful tools for every business. Tools that connect you to the power of the cloud. Tools that make you more efficient. Tools that you can take anywhere. Tools that are purpose-built for your business and customers. Tools that work for you, from the storefront to the warehouse. Android is the world's choice for mobile. It's easy, robust, and designed to be used by anyone. No matter what industry, Android provides enhanced security to keep your data safe. It's designed to be innovative yet reliable, to help your people work smarter and faster. After all, with great tools come great results. Android, powering the world's work devices.
So that's Android. Some interesting stats here. This is the slides we put up in our London partner conference back in January, early this year. And when people say to us, why Android? It's almost, you look at these figures, it's like, why not? Because everyone else is doing it. We are the world's largest mobility platform. In fact, Android overtook Windows as the most popular operating system globally. Right? It's a pretty big figure, right? The most popular operating system. And why? Because it's such an open source, easy to use, free platform that is basically used by so many OEMs, some of which are here today. And there's 1.5 million Android devices being activated every day. 1,300 device brands, 24,000 different devices running on Android. The Play Store, it's the largest mobile content distribution platform in the world as well. So over 1 million apps. 65 billion apps are downloaded from Play. Neil talked about billions, so we've got over 1 billion users of Android, we've got 1 billion users of Google apps. Right? So these are huge figures. So if you're a business and you're wanting to exploit the most popular platform with the widest choice of apps, then it's Android. Right? There are others out there, but they certainly don't have the market share that we do. But we have a bit of an update today. It was announced last week, so it's not 1.4 billion. Does anyone know how many? So everyone to stand up, please. Everyone stand up. We're going to have a bit of a dance. Come on, let's any dancing, right? Maybe we'll see some dancing over some beers at the Cowie Bar. $2 billion is a lot to celebrate, right? $2 billion. Android. So that's a pretty amazing figure. So, has anyone got any questions why you should consider Android? No. All right, so wide choice of form factors here in our devices business. So this is Android and Chrome, wearables, Android TV, Android Auto, Android on the Internet of Things as well. So there's so many more places that Android's been deployed. So it's not just your smartphone, it's I guess a wide range of form factors. And that's, I guess, it's the power of the platform. Some of those partners are here today, so I've highlighted a few that are here. So really thank Tom from Zebra and Daniel and John from Honeywell and John from Zebra, sorry. And the guys from Panasonic. We've got Ivan here from Panasonic. Probably someone else from Panasonic. James, all right, thank you. And Hass from Lenovo, my old colleague from Samsung, so small industry. So thanks, guys, for bringing the product display. So that's something you can, I guess, have a look at. it's interesting that, in looking at those that you would not normally consider that a rugged device that's running in a factory or running for a courier driver might actually be something that's actually from a Honeywell or a Zebra that's running Android, right? If you see the DHL guy that turns up, he's usually carrying a Windows device or something that's 10 or 15 years old, but today it's been transformed really with this technology. We have lots of operators as well, Telstra, Optus, Vodafone, our MDM partners here as well. So Prateep and Andrew from VMware are here. We've got Dean and Adam from Mobile Iron, with Pushpinder and Nermit from Saudi as well. And we're obviously representing ourselves with G Suite from an MDM point of view. So, and I haven't got everyone listed here, but I'll just put a few logos up in terms of some of our SI partners, some of our global SIs are here, Accenture and PwC. Some of the Mobilize IT team are here, and Bidder Group, Skywire. So we've got, I guess, a really broad range of partners. And because we've got such a big platform, we need partners to bring it to life, right? It's not just Google. So another interesting stat is out of the IDC tracker for Q4 2016 is that Android globally has 68% of the smartphone market in corporate, right? It's another huge stat, right? So we really have done a lot of work in the last couple of years in particular to make Android enterprise ready. And it's a huge market, right? So if you're a partner involved in this market and you wanted to sell something else other than a certain competitor of ours, and you want to get in, broaden that market share and that wallet share in the existing customer, it's a huge market to get involved in. You can see where our other competitors are in there. We don't speak badly about competitors. We just look at the charts and they can speak for themselves. We have a really strong share there. So if you're not involved in selling Android today, then perhaps this sort of information will mean that you should be. This is the projection for where that market's going to be over the next 5 or 6 years, right? It's huge. So it's a 5-fold increase, more than, right, in terms of what that market's going to mean globally. So the event theme. We sat down yesterday having a chat, Eugene and Ian and I and a couple of guys, and we thought, what's the theme? And Neil mentioned it before. We thought a one-word, one-sentence sort of thing to sign this up is really, we are ready for prime time, right? Neil said we launched sometimes at 80%, so maybe when we first launched what was called Android for Work back then, we were still struggling with getting lollipop devices out there. We were still struggling with a few policies. There's been a huge investment in that. I think today, I'm confident, unless someone can put their hand up and prove me wrong, that we've answered hopefully all of your questions. There's no more gaps, right? There's no reason today you can walk out and say, I still need to use Android without using these features. Right? So we actually think it's better. We don't think it's the same. It's not almost. We think it's better, right? So we want you to walk out today saying, absolutely, what I've been doing before managing Android has got problems, and we'll talk through some of those problems today. There's opportunities for improvement, and in fact, what you're giving us today is technology is going to actually help you improve and go further and wider, because you can't scale up to a whole organisation being mobile if you've still got some pain points in your environment. But if you truly believe it's not, then tell us. Put it up there on the screen, put your hand up, feel free to shoot us down. We want your feedback, right? We only got to this point by taking feedback from our customers. Eugene and Ian were very closely involved, and so was Ryan, involved in our global flagship program over the last couple of years, working closely with our enterprise customers in US, Australia, and EMEA, looking at what are the pain points, what does our product not do yet, right? And we fixed that. I'm pretty confident we've actually fixed everything that you need, right? And we'll show you some demos of that to bring that to life, and tomorrow you can play with it and you can decide for yourself. If it's not, then tell us. But the call to action is, if you do see something that we talk about today, and it is a pain point and it is causing problems, ask the question, what is it costing you? Is it lost productivity? Is it dollars because you're paying someone else to set up a device that's taking them an hour, when it could take 10 minutes or 2 minutes? You're doing it yourself. What else could you be doing from a productivity point of view if you weren't spending 2 hours provisioning a device? What about when it fails? Does it come back to base? How long are they out of the office for? When they're out of having a PC for or a phone? So what can we do around actually improving that for you? And if you see a solution, and we talk about one, write it down as well. Talk about it with us at the break, and tomorrow, practice it. And then we'll reach out to you, and we want you to contact, essentially, so conduct an audit in your business, get this information about what are these pain points, what are the opportunities, and talk to your partners. That includes us, your EMM provider, your system integrator, your OEM is going to supply the hardware, and your reseller. And the best combinations of a project with a customer when all those partners are sitting around a table working collaboratively on this. And when we have Coates hire up this afternoon, one of our partners, or one of our customers who worked with us with Optus and Mobiline, when we're all around a table, we solved a real business problem. And Ben, who will come along, will talk about that. But it's when you've got those partners in the room, you can actually get over those hurdles and have a successful project. So our offer after today is on that call to action is we're going to send you a post-event survey, and if you want to get involved in an Android test drive, then we've got lots of things to offer you. You make a request. If it meets our qualification criteria, then we're going to conduct a mobility assessment with you. So we'll go through the data you've collected. We'll look at those opportunities. We'll do a high-level design about how you might be able to implement that solution. We'll give you some devices to actually kick it off, so it won't cost you anything. We'll have our free services in there to run the workshop. We'll provide you some devices. We've already been doing that with some of the customers in this room who have actually started up and actually starting to run some of these proof of concepts. We'll provide tech support through that, so if there's issues with the device or with the firmware or with the EMM or with Google APIs or it's the way it's been implemented or it's your Exchange server needs to be changed, we'll work with you on that. And we'll provide input when you're ready to go into pilot with what do you need to look like in terms of a successful project, change management documentation, end user training information, pilot sort of plans and whatever else to make sure it's successful. And if necessary, we can be on site to support you. So I mentioned earlier that we were out recently with PwC and KPMG supporting a go live for hundreds of users, making sure that was a successful project. So a bit of housekeeping first. There were some brand changes. Just when everyone learnt what Android for Work was, we changed the name. So it was Android for Work and Play for Work, and it was a separate brand. That was good to get the name out there, but it did create a little bit of confusion. Is Android for Work an EMM? I just want to use Android for Work. I'm using AirWatch or I've got Mobiline. Do I need to have a separate console? So we decided to integrate that actually into the platform. So we don't talk about Android for Work anymore. It's just Android. And inside of Android, there are some enterprise-specific features. It's not Android Enterprise. These are Android Enterprise features. Right? So there is a tech link on this. So if you go to that link, we've actually got some terminology to give you a bit of a guide as to what we were calling it before. Sometimes the documentation, some of our partner information, some of the EMM guides might lag a little bit behind some of this naming. So if you see, not looking at anyone, see someone smiling down the back, I won't mention who. So some of the documentation can be a little lag. That's not everyone's fault. I mean, it's just when we change things, updates need to happen. So eventually this will all become the right brand. But essentially, if you start to look at this guide, but there's names. So Android Enterprise features, manage Google Play, the work profile, device owner was device owner. It's still a device owner, but we call it work managed device, a bit of a nicer name. And Android for Work accounts is one really important one. We're calling that managed play accounts now. It's going to be pretty much the most popular identity model going forward to actually enroll your device. So if this name gets mentioned again after this slide, we've got a swear jar. The Android for Work swear jar. I was reusing the swear jar I had from when I joined from Samsung. Neil said, if you ever mention Samsung, say, we, Samsung. It's $1 in the swear jar. So this today, it's if anyone, including our guests, because this swear jar will take the British pound and the US dollar. So no more mention of Android for Work. And some other terminology. It's important to get this right because I'll refer to these terms a few times throughout today. Bring your own device, as everyone knows, is pretty much bring any device, right? There's another flavour of that, is choose your own device, right? Corporate-owned devices are not CYOD. Your own device is the important word here. O for owned. So that is someone owns the device. They brought it along. They've either brought any old device and you don't have a policy around the minimum supported versions or the models. And then CYOD is more common, which is if you've got Android 5 or you've got an iOS this or you've got a whatever will support you, right? Let's choose your own device. Corporate-owned, personally enabled is a corporate device where you permit personal usage, right? You can add your Gmail account, your Facebook, your Twitter, etc. typically, if you've got a corporate-owned, personally enabled device, you need to provide some level of containerization for those corporate apps. Otherwise, data leaks, right? So most typically, if someone's offering a corporate device and you're allowed to install personal content, then there's some sort of product on the device that's stopping you from leaking corporate data. Kobo is the opposite of that. It's a corporate-owned device, but you're not permitted to have any other personal information on it. So if you either because you don't have a container, or because you just don't want someone driving down the road watching Foxtel Go when they should be watching the road or delivering goods or watching out for forklifts in a warehouse, right? So they're Kobo. And another flavour of Kobo is Kosu, which is the corporate-owned single use. So it could be one of these devices, for example, that just does barcode scanning or just does proof of delivery, right? Or just does kiosk in a retail environment, or just does the meeting room tablet on a wall. That's what we call Kosu. So anyone got any questions on that terminology? Is there any other sort of terminology that we've missed there? Does that sort of represent both of personal owned device and corporate owned device, and whether you can use personal work on it or not, right? Sound fair? Okay. So what I'm going to talk about now, pretty much for the next hour, is what have been the challenges and what are some of our solutions for this as of today before we get to O. We'll talk about some additional ones we've launched with O after the break. But in this one, we're going to talk about typical things and call out of these other ones in terms of the challenges you have with managing Android for you or for your customers. But device fragmentation is a big one, right? It's an open source platform. We've got thousands of OEM vendors. Each of them have different variants of their device in different countries. They then have different variants based on the carrier that they might be working with or the channel they're selling through. So we're talking about just when Tu and I were working at Samsung, just the S6, how many of those were there for Telstra, Optus, Vodafone, Open Channel in Australia, let alone the ones that were in Asia and US and Europe who were on different networks. So there's lots. And there's then different device management options. Samsung Safe, right? LG have got their version of that called Fort or something. You've got stuff that's on the Motorola devices, stuff that's on the, which is now Zebra with the MX extensions. You've got different flavors that have come from different OEMs. So if you're managing that fleet, there's lots of choices to how to manage that, which tool set to use to manage. And then the Android device, you turn it on. Everyone knows this when you turn it on. There's quite a few steps in the setup process. You've got to put some stuff in there. Are you doing it, or is the end user doing it? And what do they put in? How do they connect? How do they enroll? How do they get to the point where the device is managed? On a Chromebook, it's pretty easy. You turn it on, gets on the network, it provisions itself. But with an Android device, it's not quite there yet if you're not managing it the right way. And then there's a security perception. We're going to go through, after the break, a deep dive on security and answer all of your questions there. We've got a very senior guy called Adrian Ludwig who runs our annual reviews and also has done a lot of other webinars. I'll send you out after this links to a lot of his presentations. I've condensed some of his stuff, and it's my version of Adrian's stuff, but there's a lot of really good stuff in there that we're doing around under the hoods with security, and some changes we've also made with Android O. So hopefully we can, if you've got any qualms about security, I'm pretty confident that unless you're the Defence Department wanting a device that's got protected, which Samsung are working on now, there's any chief security officer in any organisation, they should be running Android, and I'm happy to sit down with them and explain why we're secure and why they should consider us, right? So from a security perception, we are secure, right? There's no question. And then the OS updates. It's always a challenge. We make the OS, we give it to the OEMs, they give it to the carriers, and then you get it, and it's a long cycle. So it's a project called Project Treble, which you may have seen if you've been up late watching the Google I.O. last week. If you haven't, and I'm going to take you through just a high level of what that means in terms of how we're going to optimize the update process. So, okay, if you're not using Android Enterprise features today, what are you using? Exchange ActiveSync. Probably a few years ago, people just connected up and they said, yep, you can have email and we'll make our email server available over a public port, and you can connect to that and sign in, and maybe you need a certificate, maybe you wanted to have a password on the device of a certain time frame or certain size, and need to change it after a certain number of days. Then we went into full device management, which is, I want to do a bit more security on the device. I want to actually turn off SD card. I want to block the ability to do Wi-Fi tethering. We want to stop you from installing certain apps, right, because we want the device locked down. So That was what we call full device management, and it used an API within Google Android called Device Admin. So that API is eventually will move out of our platform, right? We want to phase it out because it's been exploited by ransomware and this sort of stuff. It's coming over and it's tricking you into giving device admin privileges, changing passwords, encrypting your device, and saying, "I want some bitcoins to get it back." So it was not designed for that. But EMMs have leveraged it because we didn't have a solution before. So it's not through any fault of the ecosystem. It's because people wanted to use an Android device in business and there was nothing else. So device admin's there, but we call that legacy. And everything we're going to be talking about today is saying, how are you going to get from where you are with legacy today to using the Android Enterprise features? There's only two things you can do with Android Enterprise. You can be a profile owner, which is the work profile, or a device owner, which is work managed device. They're the only two things that are in Android Enterprise, right? So anything else is legacy, right? Including EMM containers. You can wrap apps. You can take apps from an enterprise Play Store provided by your EMM. But how many people have deployed a full set of applications that match everything that's on their PC and deployed it through one of their EMM tools, right? There usually isn't the equivalent tool available in the App Store. If you want to get it and you want to wrap it, then you need to actually go off and ask for those files to wrap it. So there's a lot of effort goes into providing an EMM-based container. So we took all that away, and I'll explain this in a bit of an OSI stack. With Android Enterprise, we built this into the platform. So we're doing all of the work that was done before to, I guess, re-architect the platform. We've brought it down a layer, we've brought it into the platform. So now we can focus on the things above it, which is what do you want to get out of the device, as opposed to let me go and build extra bits of Android that weren't there, right? It's actually there. That's what Android Enterprise is. We've actually re-engineered the platform. So what does that look like? So if you had a device today, like you've got most people here are not running Android Enterprise. And let's say it was a Android 4 device that was before any of our features we brought in terms of the trust zone. You've got a bit of hardware that, other than what might be in the marketing slides for any of the OEMs, is no different, right? It might be more rugged, it might have IP67, it might have a faster processor, it might have more RAM, it might have a bigger screen, it might have an edge on it, it might be do something really cool, but they're the same, right? Under the hoods, they're the same in terms of the Android platform. We weren't telling anyone what they should do, right, with their architecture. It was up to them to decide what was the best form factor, the right specs and feeds under the hoods. The file system wasn't encrypted, so it wasn't secure out of the box. Android was just Android. It was pretty easy to root Android, which is take over system root privileges and actually compromise the device. And then if you wanted to take what was a pretty basic open source platform and do anything with an enterprise, you needed to talk to your MDM vendor, right? And that was, again, I'm not saying it's bad, it's what was there, right? But we're talking about the past, we're talking about legacy. This is what was there. You had your EMM provider, and you could go to their application store and you could get their email app, or you could get their collaboration app, or you could get their VPN app, right? Or if you wanted to use one of your own, you could take your app that you've written yourself and you could get their SDK and you could wrap it. And what would that wrapping do? The wrapping, or the ones that were pre-wrapped in the application store, gave you things like single sign-on, VPN, data leakage protection, so if you tried to copy and paste stuff out of an email, you couldn't paste it into your Gmail. So that was all done by the EMM. So there's a lot of work required by the EMM to provide those tools, to keep up to date with the latest versions of Android, to keep up to date with the latest software that was available in the marketplace. They tended to lag behind. Like, the most native email client is Gmail on your device. The people that are using Gmail for personal flick across to a corporate version of email provided by the EMM provider, and it doesn't have some of the same features. It doesn't work as smoothly. It doesn't have some of those really slick consumer features. So there's a lag there, right, in terms of what you can get. And what we tend to find is people that have not deployed Android Enterprise, they've only got a handful of corporate apps. The rest of it's personal. People have gone into Dropbox and this sort of stuff because they can't get enterprise file share working, right? They're not using single sign-on. They've written down lots of passwords, right? These are all, I'm sure you can tell me there are lots of things that have happened with, the fact that your device is probably only getting 50% of the capability out of it. It's a very smart device, but people are still carrying a laptop and an RSA token and a 3G card and whatever else, so they can get on and connect to the environment, because their mobile device isn't really making them 100% productive. So some of the other challenges, the out-of-box experience. I'm not sort of picking on any OEMs in particular. This is just Android. This is the way it works. Connect to Wi-Fi. You've got to add a Google account of some type if you want to get apps. You've got to accept all the end user licensing agreements, and then there's any of the OEM specific stuff that might add Dropbox or a Samsung account or install Minox or whatever it might be at the end of it, right? So we're talking 10, 15, 20 steps depending on who it is and the number of next. You can skip all that if you want to, but then you won't get the most out of the platform if you skip some of that stuff, particularly the Google account. So if you do put a Google account on there because you want to get some apps, like, for example, you want to install your favorite MDM's agent. The best place and the easiest place to get it is from the Play Store, but you need a Gmail account to start with, right? Has anyone tried to set up lots of Gmail accounts at once and seen this error? Right. Our anti-fraud measures are there to stop people from creating thousands of Google accounts because that's what they do. They use that to, I guess, develop bad apps and to develop malware and essentially hack into systems. So we don't want people that shouldn't have a Google account to have one. So we do limit IP addresses. We do limit the number of backup numbers you can have. So I have had enterprise customers come to us and say, hey, how do I easily create 1,000 Gmail accounts? We can't. There's no way around it if you're trying to create Gmail accounts. But we have a solution if you go with Android Enterprise, which I'll come to. Then they go, okay, well, I can't create 1,000 Gmail accounts, so I'll use the same one on every device. Bad as well, right? Has anyone seen this error? The same account being used on any more than about 10 devices, you'll start seeing the device automatically sign out of Play Store because it will detect that there's too many concurrent users and it thinks that you are, again, a hacker. So this is our anti-fraud measures. You can't get away from this. So 10 is pretty much our limit, right? It's there for the enthusiast. He might have his watch and his phone and his laptop and his 10-inch and his 8-inch and his 7-inch and his 4-inch, right? So we've got all these devices. You can have 10, but if you are rolling out thousands of devices for certain police force that might be in this state, then no, you can't have the same account on every device. You may need to actually get some different accounts. And then what happens then? If you do put a Gmail account on the device and it's corporate owned, the device goes back in the top drawer, someone leaves, someone else starts a month or two later when you finish recruiting for the next person. There you go, you can have Bob's phone. Bob left his Gmail account on it. It's a brand new Samsung S7 or a Nexus 5X or a Pixel, and it's got Bob's Gmail account on it. Bob, if you can find it. He's on holidays in the Bahamas. Bob, remember what Gmail account you're using this? Not really. Remember the password? Nah. Can't get into it. And I've had a number of phone calls this year in particular from certain customers and partners saying, hey, we've got all these devices that are all been locked. I can't do anything with them. What do? They're going to go back to the manufacturer. They're the only ones that can unlock the setup wizard. Because if you could break the setup wizard, then you'd break Android, right? So Apple wouldn't do it for the US government, and we don't either, right? You can't break the setup wizard. So if the device is locked in factory reset protection mode, which is someone's had a personal Google account on the device or any Google account, they've given it back to you, and it's on a lock screen. The only way to get past that lock screen is to do a hard reset. As soon as you do a hard reset, factory reset protection kicks in. It's a service call, not under warranty, to your service provider and then your OEM to recover that device. So you don't really want Gmail accounts on a corporate device for that reason. All right. Some of the other reasons you don't want to use generic or even personal Gmail accounts at all, particularly in a corporate environment, is you've got no control over those accounts. So you get free services, Gmail, Drive, Photos, Hangouts. If this is a corporate-owned device, do you really want a my company name 101@gmail.com email address out there? Right? What happens if that person forgets their password? You've got no control of that account, right? You can't delete it, suspend it, reset its password. Up the settings to turn on two-factor authentication, for example, so those accounts could be compromised. If someone else accesses the same device in a shared device scenario, and I've seen this happen, that device gets reissued and there's personal data associated with the first person because they were using Google Photos. They didn't even know they took a photo. It was automatically being set up to store to Google Photos. It's been backed up. What if someone else and any of the other 1,000 devices are out there goes into the same location and looks at Google Photos and sees all that same data, right? Your personal photo has been shared across a whole organisation. If someone does happen to then compromise the account and change its password, we've had one customer say people couldn't do timesheets. The hospitality workers out there with a shared device, they couldn't submit their timesheets because the central Google account that was being used had its password changed. All right? So these are all bad reasons, right? So there's got to be a better solution for this. The other issue is if you just say, okay, I won't have Google accounts because it's too hard because of all those problems, right? So then how do you get apps on there? What apps can you put on? Your private apps? Fine. Public apps? No. Some people go to the effort of trying to take the APK from Google Play Store by using one account to get in, rip the APK out, store it, put it into their MDM and distribute it. It's actually a breach of our terms of service because you're sharing our content and you're ripping it, taking it from the developer without permission. So the only way you can get that app, if it's a public app, is to say, Microsoft, I want Outlook. Can you give me the APK? Are they going to give it to you? Probably not, right? Where are they going to put Outlook? In the public Play Store, because that's where it should be so they can maintain it. Even if you did take it out of the Play Store, next time there's a 0.1 release of that app, guess who's maintaining it? You are, right? Do you want all those millions of apps from the Play Store, you having to maintain them individually? Or would you just like Play to do it automatically for the approved ones? Right? So there's lots of reasons for why you don't want to have no Play Store account, right? Because you're limited then to the apps that you can have that either yours or that someone giving you permission to have the access to the APKs for. Otherwise, you're basically not going to have those apps. So in those situations, those customers typically have a small set of business-only apps, and that's it. They're not going to have the full exploit of the platform. Another issue is, I'm not sorry to the AirWatch guys, this could have been Mobiline or any other MDMs, but if you then do have a Google account, you do go to the Play Store, how do I get the agent? Put yourself in the shoes of the end user who's not an IT person, who's been given a device to go and do their rounds with their customer, whether it's to deliver healthcare or it's to deliver goods or whatever it might be. And you've asked them, hey, I've sent you in the mail a new device. Can you turn it on? I want you to put a Google account on there. I want you to go to the Play Store. I want you to download this name. It's a really weird name. How do I spell it? Does it have a space? Does it have a dash? Is it, which one of these 20 apps by the same vendor do I need to install? It's difficult, right? If you think about end user, which is why there's probably a lot of system integrators in here who do this for customers because it is difficult. They don't expect their end user to know how to go through 20 steps and get their device to the point of enrollment, right? So what have we done? We've fixed all this. I guarantee you we fixed it all, right? So first is, at the platform level, you can trust the hardware. We've had put a lot of things into the hardware in terms of our specifications, particularly in Android 6, to say there must be a trust zone enabled key store. So the encryption keys, the keys that have been used to sign the operating system are all stored in hardware. We can actually detect, and I'll go through a bit more detail on our security slides, how have we actually used that then to actually improve the platform to the point where the device is a trusted device, right? We don't have to put it on a trusted network anymore. We don't have to lock it right down. The device itself can be trusted because we know its posture. Encryption's turned on, so removing another area for the device to be compromised by malware. The file system's encrypted, so apps just can't get in there and go and steal stuff without permission. And Android has been updated from KitKat onwards. We called it an SE Linux version of Android. So Android is a Linux operating system. SE Linux means security enhanced. What we did with SE Linux was we said, who are you? What can you do and where? User, process, domain. So I can now define, is this app a work app? Is it a personal app? What is it trying to do as a process? Where is it trying to do with that process? Personal app, like LinkedIn, and I want to read contacts. I can read personal contacts, but I can't read work contacts because I actually know who the user is, right? So we had to re-architect that. And there's a lot of permissions built into SE Linux that we continue to update to make that secure. That's just one example of what we've done to the platform to improve things. We've also added in all those enterprise services. So the SSO capabilities, the VPN capabilities, the native data leakage controls, they're all built into the platform. So we're essentially giving a helping hand to all of our partners to say, guys, you don't have to go and build this anymore. Focus your R&D efforts on things above this layer. Work on the stuff that the customers really want, which is getting your applications to integrate with each other, getting real information out to employees, making it easy. Don't worry about having to reinvent, don't go and rewrite Android, right? This is all here in the base platform. So as a result, we can separate the device into one of two modes I mentioned before, and we'll demo this. It's either in work-only mode, which is work-managed device, so there's not dual persona, or we're in a dual persona mode called work profile, right, where the MDM is installed just into that container, right? So that's just some of our example MDM partners. We've got lots. Those ones are here today. once you've got that, then essentially what you need to then have access to is some sort of identity to be able to get into this. And I'll take you through the identity models. How are we going to solve the Gmail issue? We've got two identity models which I'm going to talk through. But essentially that identity model then allows you to then define that this is a corporate device and I want to access corporate services. I want to go to Play Store, but it's actually the managed Google Play Store. It is not the private consumer Play Store with a Gmail account, right? It's a whitelisted Play Store. And then your application can come from there legitimately because you've actually got an account that allows you to get to the Play Store without breaching any of our terms. So that's a re-architecture of the platform, right? And I think that's a nice slide to sort of show the layers and where they fit in and how we've actually gone compared to before. And the color codes are who's providing what, right? And you can see Google's providing a lot of stuff there. And even with the hardware layer, we are through our, what we call our CTS process, a compatibility test suite, and our CDD, our compatibility definition document, which is the architecture of Android. We give that to our partners and say, you must do this. So we're putting a lot of controls on the OEM partners to lift up the baseline to provide all this sort of services to you. Anyone got any questions on that? Rod? Yeah, VPP, so good question. Not at this stage. The background to that is the consumer Play Store is designed for consumers, so it takes credit cards, but most corporates are not going to accept credit cards or do purchase orders. The tax reasons in every country are different, so it's a work in progress for us to work out a better billing system that's going to suit corporates, but when that comes across, we will. But at the moment, the bulk purchase program is limited to the US only, but watch this space. I can't give you a date on it, but it's certainly a feature request that people are asking for. But in saying that, what I notice, and you maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Rod, that a lot of the corporate apps just don't need a payment for the actual mobile app to be installed. It's typically the back end that gets provided with that, so you have your licensing on the server it's connecting to. But the app itself, the client app, typically doesn't need a purchase transaction because of these limitations, right? Because if they did, then it'd be like, well, they can only roll it out to customers who are allowed to use their corporate card to buy the app. So yes, it's something we'd like to do, but I think that the problem's not huge from what we're seeing. Any other questions? So the identity models, how do we get past all these Gmail issues? So I'll go back to the start, right? This is what you could always do, right? If you were doing Android Enterprise in the past, when it was called Android for Work, dollar in the swear jar, we had the managed Google accounts, right? So essentially it was a corporate version of a Gmail account. It could be you at yourcompany.com.au or .org.au or .net or whatever you want to call yourself. So it needs your domain. So there is a sign-up process. There is a website for it, but typically you'll be on your EMM console. You're going to say, I want to sign up for Android Enterprise, and it will take you, there's two modes to go through. And it's a little bit tricky, the way it's in the console. You need to know what it's taking you to. But if it's asking you to basically submit a domain name and to create an enterprise service account and to verify your domain, then it's creating what we call a managed Google account. So you need to verify ownership of the domain. So you'll need to prove that you've got access to the administration control panel for your domain. You may not have that if you're the IT admin. You might need to go and speak to someone in the IT team that looks after your domain. You need to create user accounts because those user accounts need to then exist. They're currently in Active Directory. How do we get them into Google? Because this is a Google directory. It's not your directory, right? This is another directory to maintain. Now, it can be kept in sync, and there's processes for that, which I'll take you through, but you need to get them up there, right? So you can create them manually. You can do a CSV upload, or you can do a directory sync, right? But it's another server to implement. You need to actually do that sync. It goes outbound one way from your premises out through your firewall to Google. All the administration is done on your side. We don't do anything. We don't delete records. It's the sync process from our side. We'll send it out so from your side, we'll go out to the Google directory and make those changes. That's the user object, but then you've got the passwords as well, right? Because passwords are not part of that. They're either in an SSO usually, or they're a hash value somewhere else. So you can sync passwords if you want to. A lot of customers don't want to sync passwords with an external provider. So if you've got an identity provider like Ping or Okta or any of those sort of providers, yeah, you can point to those, or ADFS is turned on, you can use that to connect to, right? On the EMM side, there's a bit of setup, right? right? This is not a 5-minute process. You need to take the domain, you need to take the records from what we give you in terms of a token, you need to put it into the EMM, you need to set up the API integration, right? You need to do the binding, and then there's something to maintain going forward in terms of identity. So it's better than Gmail, right? And it's the only thing we had up until now, right? So this is what it looks like. You'll get access to the Google control panel. So at a minimum, if you're creating Gmail accounts, then consider these, right, as a first step, right? There's another option which will take you onto which may be better for you, but if you want to do it this way, there's some reasons why you may prefer this approach. But essentially, you'll get access to this control panel. You can create users. In that user control panel is where you, I guess, upload the users, and in the security control panel is where you go through and tell it, hey, I want to use AirWatch or Mobiline or Sorry, whoever it is, as my MDM provider. And in that security control panel, you take that token and you put it into your MDM console. So that's what it looks like in the security tab. Manage my EMM provider. In this case, we're using AirWatch. One thing I'll call out is, and this is something that's not documented, so you call it an undocumented feature if you like, don't have that tick box turned on at the bottom there. Enforce EMM policies, because what that'll do is, if you add my name at mycompany.com and it says, hey, that tick box is on, it's going to go, your EMM provider, say AirWatch, it'll try and install the AirWatch agent during the setup wizard. It's actually not something that most other MDM providers support. Right? So unless it's what we call the Google account enrollment method, where you can enter a corporate Google account and have the device recognize straight away that you need to manage it and you need to install your agent. But in fact, the only MDM that officially supports that is the Google one. So this is a little trick that has come up. So I'm just mentioning it now because it's something that's not documented, and you might think, looking at that, you should turn it on because, yeah, I'm setting up Android. I want to manage my devices. In this case, the Google Admin Control Panel isn't where you should be doing that. It's inside your MDM. That's where you're going to do all your controls. So the only thing you really need set up is that first bit, which is that AirWatch, for example, or Mobiline is the MDM provider. You don't need to tick that on the box. If those MDM providers eventually, and Eugene and Ian will talk about this, if they later on say, yes, we support the Google account enrollment method, and I'll mention all the other ones a bit later, if they say that, then clearly you can tick this on, and that's another way to enroll. But at the moment, they don't.
What if we have already ticked that, and then once I untick it, doesn't roll back?
It doesn't roll back, doesn't do anything. No.
What do we do?
It's just there. Like, what can happen, it may work sometimes. If you're using Mobiline, it actually technically works.
Just ticked it by accident.
Yep.
And now it's unticked, but it doesn't do
it. It doesn't do anything. So all that tick is doing is, if you let's say you're at the setup wizard and you get to the, say, Google account, if you type in my name at mycompany.com, it goes, oh, that domain name is doing a check, right? Our agent on the device is doing a check. So that domain name is managed by Google, and your MDM provider is, say, AirWatch in this case. It's then saying what I need to do before you do anything else is stop the setup wizard, go to the Play Store, retrieve the AirWatch agent, present you with the AirWatch install screen. That's what it did. Yeah. So you'd have to probably factory reset that device because it has unknown consequences if you, that's what I'm saying, it's because it's not validated.
Yeah.
It can fail the enrollment. So it's better off having that unticked and just running through the enrollment. Yep. Yep. Cool. All right. So let's take that offline. We'll have a chat at the break. But the reason I call this out is don't turn it on because it's not, at the moment it's not supported. Right. Yeah. Eugene, we need to add that to the doco. This is why I brought these guys along. It's like, these guys write the doco. We'll get AirWatch to update and Mobiline the others because you're right. Like, it should be in there as a warning. Don't turn it on. No one. I'll tell you what. That's the trouble is.
Until I come up here and say, "Don't take this." Oh,
yeah.
How do I explain it to the client? We take this.
Yeah.
We know what we're doing.
Yeah, that looks very cool. So, and I guess that's why we're running the session today, is to give you the tips and tricks and some of the hurdles that people have to jump over. But yeah, look, longer term, we've got a better identity solution than this, which we'll talk about next. But if you are using this one, this one does have its merits as well. It's up to you which one you want to choose, but just be aware when you are setting up for the first time, don't have that ticked. So what you'll end up with then is, if you look under billing, is you'll have a free subscription to Android, right? Now, this is one of the benefits of having this method is that later, if you want to use other Google services that you want to pay for, like Chrome device management, or you want to use G Suite, or you want to use those Google accounts for something else, then you can always add on other services. And you've already got the account set up, you've already got the passwords synced up, you've already got all the users in there, and you've already got essentially a corporate Google account. So there are some benefits for actually using this approach because it gives you a real identifiable corporate Google account that can be identical to your work email address. This is what the user directory looks like. Down the bottom right there, you'll see that there's an option there to create single users or multiple users. So you can create them one at a time or via CSV. If you want to sync them, you're not doing it from this console, you're doing it with another tool called the Google Cloud Directory Sync tool. You install that on your side. You then tell it, I want to replicate, and I know Tom's done this. If you've got support, come see Tom because he set this up nicely without any help from Google. It's fantastic. I won't give out your email address, it's all right. But it's quite simple. But once you set it up, you say, I want to target these users from this org group or this particular, let's say all mobile users or all Android users. I want to send across first name, surname, and email address, and that's it. So we're not taking a lot of data. So if your security guy's going, but you're giving all this data to Google, it's like, it's public data anyway. Once someone knows your website address, they can pretty much guess your first name or your first initial, well, they can pretty much spam email you anyway, right? So it's not particularly sensitive data. So that's all we take. So you can set that tool up if you want to create it automatically. That will keep it in sync. It's set and forget once, right? But it is still something you need to design up front. So when would you use these Google accounts? It's when you do want a Google account, a real one, right? You're planning to use, or you want to give yourself the option of using other accounts. For example, signing into Chrome, or even just to the Chrome browser, right? Or using G Suite, or using any other sort of Google service over the web where you want a corporate Google account. You want direct control of the identity, right? You want to be able to see it. You want to see the life cycle of that user. You want to be able to destroy it later on. You want to know that that account is gone. You want to have some sort of control. You want to visibly see that account in the life cycle associated with that user or associated with that device. You want to have control of that credential. And you want the users to have passwords to sign into it. So you want them to actually authenticate into the Google account. And you want the user to see the account, right? So you could still argue though, and we'll go through this in the next option, that maybe you don't need any of that. Maybe the Google account is not relevant. If all you want on that device is to get Android enterprise features deployed and you want access to the Play Store, you don't need any of this. It's only if you want to use it for other things later, right? There's another option, right? There are some challenges as well. If you have got one of those Google accounts and you've got a device that's out of the box and you connect to Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi or your 4G, to sign in, if you're using an SSO, like your ADFS box, if that's not public facing, you're not going to be able to sign into that account because it's not going to be able to redirect the password to that device because it's not on a secure, trusted network yet. It doesn't have a certificate, it's not enrolled. It's the chicken before the egg. So I've had to talk to some customers who are planning to use this account method to say, you need to modify your network architecture so that that SSO provider can be seen publicly for those users. And that's a conversation with the security team as to whether they're happy to do that. If they're not, then it's a showstopper. You need to use a different identity model because you're not going to be able to sign into the Google account when you're essentially a public session. All right? You've then got the identity administration. So, okay, if you've got Google Cloud sort of directory sync set up nicely like Tom has, fine, it's all done. But you might decide, I don't want to maintain it. What if something goes wrong? I don't want to support it. I can't be bothered. Too much other things. Everything's outsourced. I don't want it. So fine. So then this is one reason to consider maybe you don't want this method because there is admin involved. You can't also have multiple MDMs. So if you've got one for corporate, one for BYO, one for rugged, then you can't use the same domain on 3 MDMs. Right? It's only one. So that may limit you in some cases where you've got multiple MDM partners. You also need to go through the domain claim process. So as soon as you say, I want to use abc.com.au, there's issues where someone in the past has signed up to a Google service and they've since left, but they're the only one who's got the password for it. So there's a recovery process for that. You've also got to find someone who can actually help you with the verification because it's typically your mobility administrator isn't the one who administers the domain name, particularly if you're a large global company. You might be dealing with someone in Europe or US that is the one that can actually verify this. So there's a process for that. And then you can also have conflict accounts. Now a conflict account is something you're probably not aware of, but if you go to Google accounts and you say, I want to sign up for a new Google account, a new consumer one, you can say, I don't want a Gmail. I just want to use my work email address. And I'm doing that because I'm creating like a Play developer console access and I'm a developer and it's all work related, or anything I'm using for this is work related. I want to use my work email address. That's what we call conflict accounts. They're not conflict yet, but as soon as you claim abc.com.au and you create a user of the same name, let's say by directory syncing that person in, the person that had the account originally gets sent an email basically, when they go to sign into that email address, it actually automatically renamed them to gtemp123456@gmail.com and says to them, hey, sorry, this domain's been claimed by your organization. You need to change your name. If you really like gtemp, I mean, it's a pretty cool name. You can keep that or you can have to change it, right? So if you're doing that to thousands of users and you didn't know and you hadn't told them this might happen, you might have a few thousand phone calls come in saying, hey, why all of a sudden did all my accounts get renamed? So we went through this process with one of our customers recently and they looked at it and said, for an organization of 10 or 15,000 users, they actually had 3,000 conflict accounts. They said, look, we own the domain, so they're really squatting on our domain. They shouldn't have done this, but there might be some legitimate reasons why they've got these accounts. We don't want to create that upset. We don't want to go through the change management to let them know to go and get out first, because you could always say, hey, in a month's time, we're going to sync you. You've got a month to clean up your account and create a real Gmail account. But it's a challenge, right? It's something to think about. It's something we will go through with you as you're planning an deployment. Which identity model you want to go down? If you're looking at this one, then you need to consider these options first. So there's a different one. Some could argue that it's far better. It depends on your situation. It's certainly much simpler and doesn't have some of those challenges and risks. It's a few seconds to set up. There's no service accounts, there's no API set up, there's no binding, there's no user directory, there's nothing. Essentially, you go into your MDM console, you say, I want to sign up for Android. It says, what do you want to call yourself? You don't have to give it a real name, you don't have to supply an ABN, you don't have to give it a domain. You can call it whatever you like, call it Fred, right? Once you've set that up, we give it in the background an enterprise identity, just a random number. That's all we know about you. We know you called your organization Fred. We know it was called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 on our system. That's all we know. When the user signs in, and we'll go through this process, and Ian will demonstrate it in a few moments when we go through it. If you are doing a work profile, which means your BYO, you've already got your device, you've got your personal Gmail on it, you install your favorite MDM application. At that point, the MDM will go to Google Play Store and say, hey, can I have a new user ID for this organization? So we give it another random number. So we know that this organization called Fred has enrolled a new user called Bob, and in there is an enterprise ID and a customer ID for that user. That's all we know. Nothing personally identifiable about this, right? This is really great, particularly for devices that are shared, because it doesn't really matter who they are. You just need some sort of device account. All you want to do is enroll, connect to the Play Store, push out policies, and off you go, right? So it's just there to do that Play integration. There's no double login either. You don't need to log into this first and then log into your MDM, log into your applications. We leave that alone. It's not required. And you can have multiples, right? There's no user directory, right? So essentially, here's the mapping, right? In the EMM, you'll have an account name, which then gives it an ID, and then there'll be a managed Play user ID associated with that. And then that'll then connect to an enterprise ID as the organization, and that's all we see. So it's just a bunch of numbers linking things up. Is that hand up the back there, or is it someone stretching? Stretching, sorry. On your device, what you'll see is your name and work account. I mean, that can be defined in the MDM as to what it calls itself. But you don't really see, typically you would normally see something like my name at mycompany.com as my work account. We don't see that anymore. It's just a user. So it could be the user. If you're already directory syncing your EMM, that could be a real name, or it could be something random.
Just quickly, is the slide eligible for password job?
Ah, where does it say that? Well, actually, that's interesting you say that, because I picked that up. That's around APIs, right? Because we can't change. This is in the. We'd have to go and change the actual Android platform, right? So you'll see some of the APIs are called, that sort of stuff. Branding externally, yeah, but good one. I think that's 50 cents, not $1. All right, so it's a really simple thing, right? So why would you use Google Managed Play accounts, right? They sound a little bit similar. The active word here is play. If you don't need a Google account, so you're not going to use G Suite, or that's sometime they track and you want to consider it later. You don't want to have to bother with the directory synchronization. You want a really fast and seamless provisioning process. So we've got a new provisioning process, which we'll cover shortly, where I can type in AFW hash and then the name of my MDM, and it actually starts enrolling the device from that point into device owner. Right? So that's a really slick one, only supported with Managed Play accounts. There's no personal identifiable information, as I mentioned. No need for password syncs and this sort of stuff. So the Google account uses a token in the back end, so there's nothing the user needs to type in to authenticate. The user doesn't see it, right? So you can go into Account Manager and go and look for it if you want. It looks like that sort of ridiculously long name with the word Android for work in it. But it's really good for that shared device in particular and COSU deployments as well, because do you really need to give a name to a Zebra device running a delivery application or a Honeywell device that's running proof of delivery? Probably not. Right? So it really simplifies things from an identity point of view. The Managed Play Store. So you've got an account now. So two options, right? So we can talk about that probably tomorrow as well in your sessions. Each of the MDM guys will sit down with you and show you how to set up both, and for yourself you can decide which is the right approach. I'm pretty sure you'll go with Managed Play accounts in most scenarios, but happy for you to look at the other one if you need to. Because you've got an account now, we don't have Gmail. Of course, we can have Play Store. We can have anything in the Play Store, right? But you don't want everything. There's a million apps in there, right? So you don't have to sit there and go through and blacklist the games and the social media and the gambling and everything else. It's whitelist only. So you select which ones you want. You tag them in your MDM console. So I want Box, or I want Concur, or I want F5. And then they're made available. Best thing about that is no app wrapping. Right? I don't need to do anything. This is using the native platform I mentioned before. The enterprise services are in Android enterprise features in the platform. Every app that comes down is automatically wrapped. It's got those services attached to it. It will fire off and go to a VPN if it needs to. It will do single sign-on. It will do these things that are required, right? If you're running the dual persona with the work profile, then I can't copy and paste. I can't share data. I can't screenshot. I can completely protect those apps without relying on any sort of information rights management stuff that might be in that app. That's good to have in addition, but at a base layer in the app, I can't take that data and drop it into a personal app. It's native. We might just demo, if you've got a work profile there, actually, I'll come back to it. We'll do it when we get to the work profile. Sorry, Ian. So any app, right? Some people say, oh, I've got a Google device, but can I run Outlook? Of course you can. We'd like to say G Suite, or we'd like to use Gmail, but if you want to run Outlook, you can. You can run any app. You don't have to use the one the MDM provider gave you. We'd encourage you to use the native ones that are on the device, like Gmail, as an example. But if you want to use others, you can. Right, so Gmail, you may not know, is actually supported as our official product. So if you've used Divide Productivity Suite, that's essentially end of life from us. Gmail is getting all their feature support for Exchange. So it sounds a little bit weird having Gmail and connecting to Exchange because they're sort of competitive products at the back end. But you can use the Gmail client like you would use Outlook or Box or others, right? It will connect to Exchange. So we launched that, I think, April last year. And we've got a lot of users on this because there's 1 billion users of Gmail. Right? It's the most popular email platform when it comes to the email client. So it makes sense that you would add your Exchange account to that as well. We can also push out a managed config, which I'll show you in a moment, where you can actually push down the Exchange settings to the app automatically. So there's no individual setup required. We've also got task support for Exchange. So you can create your to-do list and that'll sync back to your desktop as well. But it's not just public apps in the Play Store, it's also private apps. Right? So often you deploy the private app in your own private application store. What we can do here now is you can upload those APKs into our Play Store. It's not public, it's limited to your organisation. It'll be limited to which one of those organisation models you chose. Am I choosing managed Google accounts? Am I limiting it to my .com.au domain? Or am I limiting it to my new managed Play domain or account, right? So once you've done that, you then upload the apps into that particular organisation, right? The Fred organisation or the .com organisation. The benefits of that are, in particular, is Google grade security. All the things we'll talk about after lunch is you benefit from that. And a couple of the customers I've got here today have told me some good stories about how it's actually also keeping their developers honest, internal or external. Because like someone tried to upload one this week and they said, they'd rejected it because the certificate expiry wasn't long enough. That's good. What if you'd rolled that out and you had 500 truck drivers with that app on it and the certificate expired in 3 months, right? So a good example of why, if you put it into our Play Store, we do all of our checks, our security, our scanning, our best practices, and make sure it complies with all of our certification test standards, and it's up there, right? So this is a really good way of actually validating that your app is actually good and it doesn't have any holes in it. It might just be, someone just didn't use the latest version of something and it's got a vulnerability we know about. The developer didn't know about it, wasn't intentional, but we tell you, hang on a minute, that version of WebView or something is actually bad, right? It's dependable, so it's anywhere, right? You don't have to host this, right? You've got users all around the country, all around the world. If we can distribute 4K YouTube videos anywhere in the world at a reasonable quality, then we pretty much can deploy your corporate app as well. So it's really good that you can deploy apps from there. We can push or pull, right? So in the past, if you did happen to have a Google account, let's say everyone had their Gmail account on a BYO device, if you advertised a app from the public Play Store, it advertises it, doesn't install it. It says, hey, you've got a new app. The user's got to accept it, they've got to install it, and then they can remove it if they want to because they decided they need some more space for their photos. Right? With this, we can push it, it goes to everyone, automatically, they don't get a choice. You'll just see it starting to come down from the top. It's I'm installing an application and they can't remove it. It's mandatory. So this is really important for particularly large or corporates that have got critical business applications out there. They want to know the app got out there and they particularly want to know if the update that the developer did to fix a bug actually got there as well, right? So there's an app update coming down, just a notification, and it's been installed and you can't cancel it, right? Managed configs also is the next step is you install this out to 1,000 users. Do you have to have them all call, you have to have them all ring you up and ask how to set up the Exchange server, what certificate do I choose and which server do I connect to and which authentication method? No, managed configs is essentially the app developer has provided a schema. It's sitting there in the app. When we read it into Google Play, the EMM console can read that schema and go, hey, there's a whole bunch of variables I'm going to set and I'm going to push them out automatically. And the app gets installed. Right? A little bit like Windows when you're deploying an MSI file with a response template, same thing. Right? So now on Android, you can deploy a corporate app fully configured. The work profile is where we will demo this in, if you've got one with a work profile.
So, Gerard, just on that, there's a whole bunch of...
All right, cool. Yep, all right. So we've got 15 till the break, right? All right. Maybe we can pause there for a minute and have a look at some of these questions. Rod, another one? Does Android O stand for Oreo? Don't know. I didn't answer that question last week. Unfortunately. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yes. So is it the EMM and the Managed Play Store working together there to push those apps, or is it the EMM itself pushing those apps?
The EMM is making a call on an API to push those apps that you set. So basically you're deciding, I want to assign the apps to this user group. I want to decide, is it push or pull? And then it basically calls an API, which in the agent, and the agent on the device is then saying, hey, I've checked into the server. I know that I've got a new app. I need to pull it down, and it then distributes.
So then the reporting would be on the EMM side in that sense.
The reporting of, yes, correct, of who's got what app and what version is it on, and does it distribute.
There's two questions from Tim. I don't know, Tim, if you want to call them out yourself, or I can read them out. I think it's a two-part question. The first part is the four most frequent concerns questions from Australian enterprises and government clients are: one, security beyond MDM, EMM tool. 2, fragmentations. 3, increasing data usage costs. And 4, lack of budget beyond MDM tool. I guess that's a question or a statement. Tim, are you there? Do you want to phrase that out? Oh, okay, go for it. So it's great that we see 2 will be addressed by Google Android O with Project Treble. Is the session will also address 1, 3, and 4?
We can probably speak to 1 a little bit later in the security.
Yeah, so we'll do a whole hour on security.
Yeah.
The Project Treble addresses the fragmentation. Data usage costs, I think there's some representatives from Telstra and Optus here today. So.
And the last one was lack of budget beyond. What do you mean by that last piece? The number 4?
Well, they have an existing MDM, but they don't have budget.
So the answer to that is they don't need them. Well, that's our view anyway. If someone says, do you absolutely need a third-party antivirus malware tool on your device? I say no. We have Google Play Protect, which we'll go through at 2 o'clock. But absolutely, you don't need it. It's good that they're in the ecosystem, those providers, because they do provide some research, but the reality is we tend to know about these things a lot sooner than the rest of the ecosystem do, because we've got 2 billion devices under management. So we typically fix that before such time as it ends up as a signature in your threat management tool. But I'll cover that as well. Yeah.
With the discussion around data management and data costs, they spoke a lot about Android Go at Google I/O, and a lot of that had all of that data management in there for all those countries like Australia that have really bad mobile data.
Yeah.
Are those going to be actually in Android O as a full feature as well, or is it going to be completely separate?
Good question. Maybe I can take a stab at that. So really what we're talking about is the minimal data use of Go, right? Yeah.
And you've got those controls around it too that you can say, look, I'm going to do YouTube at only 3 megabytes, for example.
Yeah. So largely from an enterprise perspective, Go is not going to meet the specifications for what we need on a platform. So you won't see a lot of what Go does inside our enterprise.
So basically those features aren't going to be inside the full feature of Android O either. So you've developed all these data management features for a platform that won't be in the full featured one?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Are we going to translate those reporting and control features to Android?
Yeah.
That's a good question. I actually don't know that. Do you know?
No, I'm not sure what the latest is. We'll take that back.
I'll go down the list. Matthew asks, is a mobility environment audit sheet available?
Matthew, can you give us a better understanding of what you mean by a mobility audit sheet?
Yeah, there was a slide from there earlier that with G Suite, we've got a bunch of different sheets we can use to audit internally to see where we're going with certain things. So is there a sheet with, I guess, best questions to look at or best things to look at internally?
Yes, yeah, there is. So we've got some what we call solution validation workbooks, as well as some mobility profiling ones. So if you come to the business stream for mobility tomorrow, the last session over at Wharf 7, I'm going to go through that. There's also, if you're a G Suite partner, there is a training course, which is the mobility assessment course, which will help you go through and actually run through some of the same templates, give you some examples of the types of questions to ask yourself or your customers as to their mobility profile, so you can actually propose the right solution.
So anonymous question, which of the EMM partners that is not represented at the breakout sessions on Wednesday but is already partnered with Android for Work do you think is likely to be best represented in enterprise in coming years?
We love anonymous questions.
I think this one we should probably save for the afternoon. We have a whole session dedicated to how we work with our EMM ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about some tools that you can use to actually hopefully answer that question for yourselves.
One thing I would add though is that particularly for Ian and I, because we come from the Android platform team, we try to establish a sense of neutrality between all of our partners. So we'll be careful about framing that question and answering it, just so you know.
Good question from Tom. Yes, so when you're in a work managed device, you can say no Google accounts and also no additional users. Like a lot of tablets have user creation as well, so you can have switch between users. We can turn that off completely. Yep. And yes, Microsoft are an Intune partner. They're in their phase 1 of the implementation. There's some exciting stuff in their roadmap coming up as well, which I guess we can talk about.
You want to save for later? Or you want to cover it?
Let's say for later.
Yeah. Yep. So that's yes. With private app hosting, yeah. Well, if you break Google rules, yes, then you won't be able to upload the app essentially, right? So
It's funny how I said we like anonymous questions.
Yeah.
Now they're all
So just one above that we just missed. How does Android differ from Apple? Both seem to offer the exact same things.
I wouldn't say exact. Of course, we're better, right? It's horses for courses, and I think there's space in the ecosystem for more than one vendor, and I think we provide a whole range of different choices that perhaps you don't get in other vendors in terms of price points and form factors and locations where we operate, and the applicability of those things to certain business processes. I mean, I don't think if you look at an Apple device, and I say this to all of our resellers, if you're selling Apple only to someone, have you got 100% of the wallet share of that customer? Are they giving an iPhone to the delivery driver, to the warehouse worker, to the bank teller? They're not. Right? Absolutely they're not. Right? They're not going to fund one of those devices at that price point. But if you can offer BYO and allow them to bring their own device, a lot of people choose Android, or if you want to roll out a lower cost device, then certainly there's choice there. So I think we both do different things differently, and there's certain reasons for why you would choose one over the other.
So does Gmail app only support EAS?
You can also hook up to O365, but Lotus Notes is not supported today.
Is there much work happening that you're aware of in the IoT and M2M space with Google and Android?
Yes.
Short. Okay, we'll come back to that. So OEMs like Samsung spend a lot of time and resource investing in items such as Knox, customization, and somebody closed my Q&A in the middle of the Q&A. That's awkward.
Yeah, I know the question. So, Brett, my answer to that question is another question. With any of those methods that Samsung provide, do they create a Google account for you?
Feature parity. So obviously those people use Knox customization, Knox mobile enrollment, Knox profiles. Is that something Google actively look at and are looking to getting towards feature parity? So it's not, like there's so many more options for configuration within Knox than there is within Android for Work.
The way I would approach that is to say that in terms of the zero-touch stuff, absolutely we're going to offer what is an alternative to Knox mobile enrollment, which we'll talk about after the break, and that's coming. All right? It's not here just yet, so I mentioned that we've got some stuff that's in the wings. We will resolve that. In terms of Knox customization, it depends on what you're doing with it. A lot of the stuff it's doing is just locking a device into a sort of a kiosk mode, and we can do a lot of that stuff with Work Managed Device in terms of hiding system icons like the phone and the other sort of stuff that was preloaded, and we can push apps down and we can block the ability to factory reset. If we start talking about OEM-specific hardware controls like changing the function of a button, like a hardware button, no, we can't do that. So there's a place for those sort of tools in those scenarios. But I did work with one large customer who the first app they were deploying was a private app, right? But they couldn't get the MDM agent on the device because that came from the Play Store. So even just that, not with any other apps, is how do I actually get my MDM agent on the device if it's not available through any other method? And then how do I update it if I didn't get it from the Play Store? So just that alone, then considering that the devices are out there for 3 years, today I might be delivering one app, but there's plenty of other apps I might want, and if I don't put the Google account on when I provision the device, it's going to be a lot harder to do it when the horse is bolted and there's thousands of devices out there. So yes, in certain cases they've got a niche solution, but I would say it's niche. It suits certain use cases. It doesn't suit all. And we are working together with them on integrating that so that down the track you'll see more of us working together. But that's that's on the roadmap, I guess.
Yeah, I might add something to that. We work pretty closely with all of our OEMs, right? And we're always evaluating the key features that they feel are important, that our customers feel are important. And one of the distinctions that we have to make is what should live in the platform and what should be something an OEM does. And so we're working very actively, obviously, with Samsung. I mean, they're a huge player in the market. And we evaluate all the Knox stuff. And so I think if you keep an eye on the space, you'll probably see some interesting things come down the pipe.
Same for features as well. There's different features in the consumer space that we're able to adopt to the enterprise.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, at the end of the day, we're not competing with Samsung, right? You mentioned feature parity, but we're not trying to, you shouldn't have to go through the conversation of do I do Knox or Android Enterprise in your deployment. You should be able to use the tools that Android has and augment that consistent baseline that Android provides with OEM feature add-ons, right? Samsung's not the only vendor that provides that. Like, all of the partners up here have additional features that they provide into their devices to make them more valuable to specific use cases. So and we're working very closely with Samsung to make sure that message and from a technology and a messaging perspective is consistent so that you don't have to think of it as do I do this or this?
Yeah. So eventually you get to the point where a lot of that stuff you can do in our platform, you can use the best of both worlds is the aim, right? You want to deploy with all the features we've got because that's the most simple and easiest provisioning method, but then we'll be able to flavor on top of that some of the OEM specific stuff. So that's the goal, so that there isn't that have the choice of which path do I go down and I can't jump between the two because there's so much change required to switch between the two. So as I mentioned, we've got only two ways to enroll. And you've got to make that decision pretty much out of box. You can't go back to a work-managed device later. You've got a factory reset. Right? So we've got to decide what use case we're going to use. Right? So with the work profile, going back to my terminology earlier, it really supports BYOD, CYOD. It's not currently ideal for COPE, but you can deploy it that way as long as you understand the things around factory reset protection. So if this becomes a corporate device with a Gmail account on it, be aware if someone gives back their corporate device and it's still with the Gmail account on it and they don't tell you, you're going to have the factory reset issue. So work profile is okay in COPE, but as long as you're aware that the asset needs to be managed and a part of your checklist for signing and signing out hardware to employees needs to include the device must be reset before being given back. All right? So with the work profile, as we mentioned, and Ian's going to present this in the demo desk, hopefully, is essentially a device that has a set of badged applications. So you'll see the native apps, and you'll see some apps that have a briefcase badge on them. The briefcase badge means it's actually delivered from a work version of the Play Store. So if we launch that Play Store, there's actually two Play Store icons. And this one is actually connected up to a work account. So we click on the little three tabs at the top there. This is actually linked up to a user there, right? It's actually at a domain, right? So which identity model is that one? Anyone? Perfect. Your choice of prize, maybe a T-shirt, Michael, for the first one to answer a question. Yeah. Then we go back there and into the Play Store. We can see all the work apps, right? So which productivity apps are permitted? Not the ones that are available across the whole of the Play Stores, just the apps that are allowed by the administrator, and we can then interactively install. So that's a pull install. It's not a push install. When you enrolled the first time, it would have pushed down all the push install mandatory apps. We go back to the home screen. We can then see that in some cases, there might be two versions of the same app. Like Play Store has got its icon, but if we go back to the home screen, there's also another Play Store, which is the uncontrolled Play Store, which is for your personal account. Now, we probably don't have a personal account on here, so we can't show you, so we don't have a Gmail. But you get the picture, right? That's where you can have personal accounts. But in the situation Tom mentioned, we don't want that, right? We don't want people to have a personal account because it's a corporate-only device. When we launch any of these apps, if we launch Salesforce, for example, it looks just like Salesforce, and we launch it without a badge, so we have a little reminder at the top of the screen. You can just see there's a little grey icon there, which is for the work badge, reminds you in the work app at the top there. All right? So that will denote that you are. You'll probably also get a reminder that when you try and share something from there, we'll only share it to other work apps. You go, why can't I share this to Dropbox? Because you're in a work app. Why can't I screen copy? If I do the hardware button controls to do a screen capture, it's blocked. If I copy some data and I try and paste it to a personal app, it won't see the clipboard because that clipboard belongs to the work user, right? So it's really good for dual persona. We haven't had to wrap any of these applications. The administrator simply said, I want Salesforce and a bunch of other apps. They're provided, they're available, they're already pre-wrapped, right? So that's dual persona. It's what we call work profile. One of the benefits of this is work mode as well. So work-life balance. We go back to the home screen. You're all familiar with flight mode on the planes. There's also another button called work mode. This is an Android 7 device that supports work mode. We go, let's turn off work mode. What happened to all my work apps? They're all grayed out. No notifications are going to happen. You don't know there's an email. The phone will still ring, unfortunately, but you won't get any emails, you won't get any notifications, right? So that's really handy for after hours. Good if you're on holidays and you don't want to chew up your data when you're roaming around because you've bought a travel sim or whatever else. People ask that all the time. Is that on our roadmap?
So, hi, me in the back. There are APIs for your EMM to be able to disable applications. In fact, it's a required feature. So, for instance, if the device falls out of compliance, they need to be able to block access to users getting into those applications and their work data. So, absolutely, there is the ability to do that. It doesn't have the dialogue that allows you to turn it back on, of course. It just informs you that your administrator has blocked access to your application.
Yeah, it's called suspend apps, right? So, which is what it's doing. So a couple of benefits there. Personal privacy is really good from a BYO point of view because the work EMM agent, you can see on that device there, all those badged applications are controlled by a device agent which sits inside the badged application. So test DPC is our test one. So we weren't favouring one of our MDM partners. We've got our own test one there. But on the screen here, on the presentation, you can see the Google device policies there. It can only see work, right? It's only managing the work account. So if someone leaves, you wipe that account and it wipes the profile, the device goes back to the way it was before, right? If they happen to forget their password or they try it too many times and your EMM's been set up to say after 10 attempts, I'm going to wipe your account. We had a lady at one of our events we did with one of our customers and when we were doing the go live said, oh, this is great because the device was in a handbag, just walking along, bang, 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 10 times, send a wipe command, contacts, photos, the whole lot gone. So having personal and work separation is really good from a work-life balance point of view as well as your personal privacy. Your browsing history doesn't go through the VPN, your apps you install from Play Store are all private, right? So Ian's just going to delete a work profile there. If you delete that work profile, that work agent goes off the device. The device is now, I've left the organization. This device is now running just like it was before. I've got no work apps on it. It's really simple, onboard, offboard, right? Particularly if you're a contractor. Work managed device, though, as I mentioned, needs to be done at enrollment. And we'll go through the enrollment methods, but you need to be at the setup screen. Factory reset or out of box, and we're going to provision it into device owner control. So you can do a whole bunch of things. We can set policies, whole of device things. So some of the things that were only available in the past in Samsung Knox with the kiosk mode, we've got a lot of those controls now on our platform. Not everything, but we've got a lot of what you need to lock that device into a single purpose or a set of single applications for that particular purpose. So we can even hide the phone. If we grab the Honeywell CT50 over there and put that on screen, it's sitting in device owner mode, and I've actually hidden the phone icon. And I've hidden a whole bunch of things on that device. So you can see that one there. 1, 2, 3, 4, very highly secure. But you can see there, down the bottom, it would normally have phone, browser, contacts. I've actually hidden them. And the only apps that are available are work apps only. So if you went to the Play Store on that device, it's only the work Play Store. Now in this mode, there's no badging because there is no personal apps. We don't need a badge. In fact, we would actually encourage you to set a policy that says do not allow the ability to add in accounts because this is a Kobo, right? Anyone remember what Kobo is? I think the gentleman here in the front row. Oh, Luke. Luke got that first, wasn't it? Whoever got that first, yeah, corporate owned business only, right? So a t-shirt maybe. Who was it? 2 or Luke? I didn't see. Luke.
the shirt. Just cut it right up the middle.
Yeah, for sure. You got the crop top, right?
You fight for it.
All right. So we can hide apps. We can wipe the whole device. Now, factory reset protection. No Gmail accounts on a work device. No factory reset protection issues, right? And if someone did happen to add one, we've also got a get out of jail free account. Where here, as an example, our device policy controller for a G Suite, I've got an account that can be used to override that. Should someone happen to put a Gmail in there somehow, we can actually get out of it, right? So that's really good, right? There's no work profile currently in device owner. So you're in one or two modes. If you want COPE or BYOD, you're in work profile. If you want full control of the device, you're in work managed device, but you've got no personal accounts. There's no mix between the two, right? You can't be a device owner and then have work profile today, right? But that's going to change, and we'll cover that. Provisioning methods. So how do we do this? So work profile mode, manual install. You typically expect in BYO the user's got the device, it's their device. They've joined your organisation or they've purchased one, they're entitled to claim their device against some of their data or whatever else under your policy. Then they're going to have a Gmail account, so you will tell them to go through the manual process, go and get your preferred MDM agent, install it. Selected MDMs will also support Google account enrollment. So today that's only G Suite, so anyone's been validated. But if you're a G Suite customer, and you probably know this, if you've worked with G Suite, you can actually add your work account and it says, oh, your administrator requires you to have mobile management chain on. It installs the MDM agent as you're going. So we're going to do this here on screen. And it's saying, we've added a work account, and it's saying you must set up a work profile, and it's actually doing an enroll just by entering an email address. So it's not zero touch, but it's pretty close. So it's pretty good. For G Suite customers, it's actually not a bad feature for reducing some of the friction for someone to enroll. They don't have to have their Gmail account first. It can be at the setup wizard, or it can be later. Anytime they add a work account, it'll say, hey, you must be under management, or I must install you. But we don't support any other methods for work profile today that are supported. It's possible that they may come down the track, but today there is nothing that's available. For device owner, you can't do a manual install because it's got to be done from the factory wizard. So you've got to be in setup wizard. You've got to be at factory reset. You've got to be in that home screen. So we've got a device here which you're going to set up into device owner mode.
Gerard, you got a call. I mean, a question, not a call.
Question. For which one? Sorry, for enrollment. Yeah, you can be on Wi-Fi or 4G. Doesn't matter as long as you got internet connectivity. This is internet connectivity because you're going to Play Store, right? So again, you can't do manual install because you've got to do this before you finish the setup wizard. With G Suite, again, you can do Google account enrollment where it will say, hey, this device has been pre-registered to be device owner, so I'll put you into this mode, but only with G Suite at the moment. The other way to do it is with NFC bump. So Ian's going to show you a master device that's been set up. Then that master device, what we're telling the child device is which Wi-Fi network to connect to, which MDM agent to go and get, what account to go to Play Store to get that agent from, and then to retrieve it. So that device is at factory reset, and just with a simple tap, it's got onto the Google Guest network, it's gone off to the Play Store, it's retrieved the test TPC agent, and it's installing. James is nodding over here because this will be on the stage a bit later, but Spotless, one of the quotes is they went from one person deploying 12 devices a day to one person doing 50. It's massive, right? They did a couple hundred devices in a week, right? All enrolled this method because, it just required a simple tap. And then it's going to, when it's finished, it took 20 seconds and the device is enrolled, and then any apps that are required will come down. QR code is another one where we only, that's NFC bump's fine if you've got a device that's got NFC, but some tablets don't, particularly some of the consumer tablets. So QR code supported from version 7. So what we're going to do now is we're going to tap the screen 8 times, and it's going to bring up a QR code reader. When we click on next, we can actually then point that to, so first off we need to get onto Wi-Fi because we're not in the QR code going to know what Wi-Fi we're on, so we'll connect to Google Guest. And then we'll scan that QR code when it finishes checking for updates, and that will then tell it the same thing as the NFC bump did. So I don't need a master device. So if you think about this as a device out in the field, you could email users a barcode, so that the barcode for the QR. You could have it in the workplace, whatever else. You could have it available in other locations, etc. They just need to scan that. Okay, your admin says you need to manage this device. What am I doing? Now downloading the admin agent. A little bit longer because you've got to tap it a few times and you've got to scan it. A little bit tricky, but almost as quick as the NFC bump, but I didn't even have to have a master device. So one of the prison systems in the US were rolling this out. It's like, well, if NFC bump was there anyway, they're going to have a master device at each of the prisons. Right? But here, we can actually do this with a QR code without requiring an IT person to be there and without requiring a master device. The final one is for, without even requiring a QR code, is what we call, it's an odd name, AFW DPC identifier, another 50 cents in the swear jar for AFW, but again, this is in the code, so we can't change this. That's a doll now, right? This is a bad one, right? AFW. DPC is our word for device policy controller, in other words, the MDM agent. We're just going to type in AFW hash and the name of the MDM, and it goes, so you're trying to install that MDM. I'm going to use managed play account is the account it's going to use to enroll. Go to the Play Store, grab the agent, bring it down, install it, and nothing else required. All right. Just wait for that to finish its updates. All right, so in here, we're going to type in AFW. This is into the Google email address field, so you must be at factory setup, as we mentioned. We're using a test. Install. All right. So it's pretty quick. All right. So we've pretty much, I would say, unless anyone wants to correct me, we've solved all our problems around fast provisioning, really simple without requiring too much effort. In fact, putting it in the end user's hands, identity, access to the Play Store, containerization of apps, management of devices, device fragmentation. Ready for prime time. Thanks, Luke. Now you can have your own t-shirt. Right. If you want to try this yourself and you haven't set up your MDM, we have the Android management experience. If we go to this URL, you can sign in. I won't do it now because we're going to run out of time. But sign into that with a Gmail account. And in there, what you can do is you can provision users. You can do both of the work profile as well as, I'll go back to there if you want the URL. I will send this slide deck out. If you go to that URL, then you can provision devices into the work profile or device owner. It's got its own AFW hash, I think demo, I think is the hash code enrollment. You can choose a bunch of apps. We've got a few sample apps that you can install. There's a few sample policies you can apply. You can actually test it out and see what it looks like. So it's a good way to get a proof of concept off the ground to go and get the stakeholders to say, hey, this is what it's going to look like. Test out on some of the devices you've got and get it up and running.